Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Pinnacle Podcast. I am Caleb, our connections pastor here at Pinnacle today, and I'm with our lead pastor, Heath Davis. And we are in a series that we started last week where we're just talking about some of the big questions that a lot of people have about faith, about God, about the church, about Jesus. And I'm really excited today because we're going to kind of give a little brief overview of kind of what we feel and how we tackle the question of how do we deal with religion and science. How do we deal science, Bill Nye, yeah, all that fun stuff. But before we dive into that question, I just want to tell you first off, our hope today is that if you have any deeper questions about this stuff, if you have more further questions about your faith, about religion, about the church, we really want to encourage you to get involved with Starting Point here at Pinnacle Church. It is a phenomenal small group where we have people gather together to really come and answer their why questions about faith.
Yeah.
And so Chris and Jane Warbelow lead that. It's going to be kicking off here in a couple of weeks. If you're interested in that, there's going to be a link in the show notes. You can sign up to get involved in that group. They're going to be meeting digitally right now because of the season that we're in. And so we're really looking forward to that. And I would really encourage you, if you've got deeper questions about your faith, or maybe you're just trying to still figure all this stuff out, I really encourage you to get involved in that group so that you can go further with your questions.
Yeah,
so
we're doing the 20,000 feet look, and they'll do the right up close.
Oh, they'll
up
go
at
deep.
certain point.
Yeah, we're just going to give a little brief overview today, kind of
Sweet.
talk about what we feel about this question, and
Do
go
they
from there.
know our former past? Of the
I
two of
don't
us?
think they do. So before I came on staff here at Pinnacle, I was a science teacher. I
Yep.
taught sixth grade science right down the road at Canton Middle School.
Me too.
And we were talking about this yesterday. Can I make you feel old?
Yeah, you made me feel old.
I would
man.
have been in your seventh grade class.
You would have been in my 7th grade science and social studies class.
Yeah,
yes.
absolutely. So we both are.
But you would have had fun because there's still a hole in Canton Middle in the ceiling where I blew a hole in it.
Yeah. Man, my science
That's how we
class,
roll.
That's what we did, man. My like second day, we were making volcanoes, and I shot something off and hit a girl square in the face,
See,
and I
man.
still feel bad for that sweet little gal.
That's why you
But-
had to leave teaching, right?
Okay, exactly. That's why I'm
No,
in
we're
ministry now. Totally not true.
Kidding.
Yeah, so we're talking today about really the big question is how can I reconcile my faith with science? Because sometimes I think we get so wrapped around certain aspects of religion or of scripture or of different things that we feel like if we believe this way, we can't go to where maybe what science and different minds that are out there that are teaching us about the way the world is formed or the way things happen. We feel like we can't really trust it or we can't really believe it. And so I feel like sometimes as Christians, there's a lot of tension maybe there of
Yeah.
what exactly am I supposed to believe?
What do I
maybe
do
you
with this?
Yeah, what do I do with it?
Well, I think first off, we've got to understand that it's interesting. Stephen Jay Gould, who is a evolutionary atheist scientist, but I don't agree with him on a lot of things. But I do agree with a statement he made one time. He said that science and religion were two magisteriums, two separate things that each had two different roles in society. Science tells you, concrete how the world works, but science could not give you meaning and morality. Religion gives you meaning and worth and morality. And I think that's the thing we have to understand is science and faith are not to me incompatible, but they have two different purposes.
Yeah.
Science tells me how the physical world works. It tells me what happens when atoms collide together and things like that. And of course, we are still learning, and we don't know everything we know. We're not God. He's the creator. He knows everything. But faith, science can never tell me. Science can tell me what a thing is, but as Timothy Keller, I love Keller,
Yeah.
and other philosophers, Keller, this isn't original to him, but science can tell me what something is, but it can never tell me what I ought to do with what it is. It can't give me morality.
Mhm.
And some people say, well, there's a morality of science, but that just falls apart. If science is just simply, this is how the world works. This atom does this physical effect does that. Something else has to tell me what my morality and how do I make judgments based off of that. And people will say, well, no, I don't have any religious faith and stuff, and my science gives me judgments, but you still are getting your morality from somewhere. So my thing is, you can love science, you can love studying that, and for me, especially like when we study cosmology and physics and things like that, the more we understand, it just shows me how great a creator God is.
Yeah.
When I look at things as we study about the expanding universe and things like that, that to me doesn't negate my faith. It actually makes my faith stronger.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, wow, look at what God did. But I can never get my morality or my meaning from that.
Yeah.
It has to come from something outside of that, and that's where faith comes in. I think that's the big, distinction between the two.
Yeah, I think for me, I know the biggest Andy Stanley in his book Irresistible, he talks about this, and he says that he tells the story of a girl that he knew from like very young age. She goes off and she goes to high school, and she's like very prominent in their student ministry and in her faith. And she goes to college, and she's sitting in her freshman biology class, and she's kind of outspoken about her faith to a lot of people. And so the professor gets to know her that way. And the professor, they're preparing for their conversation on evolutionary biology, and the professor's like going deep into evolution and going deep into all these things and such. And the girl's just sitting there soaking it all in and soaking all that stuff up. And the professor looks at it and says, okay, I don't remember her name. We'll call her Katie. She says, okay, Katie, so where do you stand on all this stuff? And she's like, this doesn't bother me at all. And the professor's kind of taken aback, like, how does this not bother you at all? And she's like, well, this doesn't bother me at all because my faith is not tied to something like that. My faith is tied to
The
the resurrection of Jesus.
Exactly.
And that's what this all boils down to for me.
Yeah.
Like there's no science that's going to be able to disprove the resurrection, in my opinion. Nothing that I've been able to see. And so I think that's where it goes to for me, is that my faith is not tied up in whether it's evolution or whether it's creation or whether it's whether the universe is old or young or whether it's all these different things that science tends to show us sometimes. My faith is tied up in a man named Jesus. Who I really think
that's what matters.
Lived and died and rose from the dead. And so that's what my faith is tethered to.
Yeah, we tether our faith to the resurrection, and then the other things that happen in the world, and as we study, are just things to me. Paul tells us in Romans, the heavens declare the glory of God, and so just as we understand more and more how the universe works, that just helps us to glorify God.
Yeah, I think it's so cool. Like you were talking about, like learning more and more about how big our universe really is. I mean, I agree. That just shows me more of the majesty of God.
I guess the point is if some people have a hang up. I've had friends who tell me this. They're like, I can't be a Christian because I'm a scientist and I believe in science. And I'm like, that's not true. You can hold both.
Yeah.
And you can have a belief in both. And I think the thing that we have to understand, especially as evangelical Christians, is that when it comes to where we really get down in the weeds sometimes with each other and draw lines and put up walls is when we get to our interpretations of the creation accounts and stuff.
Yeah.
And there's some different viewpoints on that. And I think we have to realize that very well-meaning, gospel-centered, Jesus-believing, resurrection-believing Christians have had different interpretations of the 6 days of creation and stuff like that. And we've got to be willing to give some grace to people who disagree with opinions that we may have and understand they're not gospel issues. Now, there's some people that would say it is, but I disagree with that. And
yeah.
So, yeah.
I agree with you. I think it's kind of an open-handed issue.
I think it is.
In a sense. I agree. I think that whether creation happened in 6 days like we know it or whether it was something different
periods
than that.
Periods
of time, whatever that looks like. I think that's an open-handed thing for me.
Some people think the Earth's 6,000 years old. Some very solid conservative Christians believe the Earth is very old. They take the Hebrew word yom that means day, and they think it means long periods of time. And then, of course, you've got some Christians who are what's called a theistic evolutionist, and there's some problems with that they have to surmount with the problem of death and things. But these are people who love Jesus. They just think that they take and believe that evolution is how God made it all over time. And I can have a discussion with a person like that, but as long as they still believe Jesus rose from the dead and have a belief in him and stuff. Now, some people would think we went too far with that, but I don't think so.
Yeah, I agree.
So, yeah.
I agree.
So the bottom line is, for me, science is not an enemy to our faith. Yeah. It's how you wield it and use it that can be. Because, some people try to use it to tear us down and stuff, but they're not incompatible, I don't think. Yeah. So, yeah.
I love that. I think that's so true. And I think the big thing that I'm taking away from this conversation is kind of what you said at the beginning. Science can tell us a lot about the world, but it can't tell us what to do with it.
Exactly.
And that's where our religion and our faith comes in, and our following Jesus. It tells us exactly how we are to live our lives. And I think Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I mean,
No.
because if you think science tells you what to do, there was a period in time when we forget this. The established science of the generation around the 1900s and before the 30s was eugenics. Science said that you can breed a person, and certain races of people are undesirable. And guys, that was the science of the time. All the leading science minds thought eugenics was the way to go. Well, that's morally wrong.
Yeah.
And so if you just go with what they hard data thought science, it's like, oh yeah, we can breed undesirable people out, or we can sterilize people. We can sterilize African Americans because we don't think they're desirable. We can sterilize Jewish people because we don't think they're desirable.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have a morality that
There
comes
has to be a
into it.
morality that comes into play. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
And I think a big thing too that I'm getting out of our conversation today is we don't need to be so hard pressed to say it's got to be this way or it's got to be that way.
Yeah.
I think in a lot of things when it comes to religion and science, it gives us an opportunity to really dig deeper into our faith
I
and
think so.
really study more of okay, God, what is it that you're really trying to show
tell
us,
me.
maybe, or teach us through what's being discovered or what's being
Yeah.
shown? What is it that's really out there? And so if that's you today, if you're like watching this or you're listening to this and you're like, man, I really would like to know more about this conversation, I really do encourage you to just take a deeper dive on your own, to study, to go to reliable sources that you can go and learn more about where faith and where science comes to play. One of my favorite podcasts that I listen to right now, I know I've talked to you about it before, it's called Unbelievable by Justin Brierley, and it's a phenomenal podcast where he has Christian and a lot of times Christian and atheist scholars that come in and debate different ideas about Christianity, and a lot of times their conversation is about religion and science and where the two maybe where the tension is there. And I love hearing that because I get to really hear both sides of the argument.
Yeah.
And I think that really helps.
That's a great resource.
Strengthen me as a believer also. So
Yeah,
so
it's
I
a great
think that's really
resource.
good. Yeah. Well, anything else about religion, science, faith, the tension that we sometimes struggle with there?
I will say this. I think that for the more science-based people like us, sometimes it can be hard for us that we think we have to have all the answers and concrete evidence and everything. But you can neither prove nor disprove the existence of God.
Yeah.
And any intellectually honest atheist will tell you that.
Yeah.
You have some hardcore ones that are like, no, God does not exist. But like a friend of ours he's intellectually honest enough to say, I can't prove whether he exists or does not exist. But for me, we have enough evidence for me to make a faith choice that I can put my faith in that. And so if you think some people will get so far into the realm that they think, well, I only live by logic, that's not true. Everybody lives off of faith at some level. You make faith-based assumptions all the time. And so maybe my question to you is if you see this conflict between your scientific views and religion, maybe you need to look at the places where you do make decisions in faith, and that might push you to explore a little more this realm of faith that we talk about and stuff.
That's really good.
And so for the Christians out there, I'd also say you don't have to be afraid of science.
Yeah.
It's not the enemy. No.
Yeah.
It's what people do with it that can be damaging to us.
Exactly.
Science is great. It tells us how the world works.
Exactly.
Real as God.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
Couldn't agree more. Well, hey, guys, thank you so much for joining us today. Love this conversation. And we just really want to encourage you. If you'd like to take this conversation a little bit further, maybe you've got more questions. Maybe we hit on something today and you're like, man, I'd really like to learn a lot more about that. Really, really encourage you to get involved with Starting Point here at Pinnacle. They take questions like this and go into deep dives and really discuss the why questions behind our faith and what it is that we really believe. And so I would really encourage you to get involved in that. We're going to post a link with the show notes. We might even post a link to the Unbelievable podcast. I know we talked about that. Yeah. And we would just want to give you any resource that you might need as you maybe wrestle with some of the questions that you have about your faith. We're going to be back next week as we talk about another question, and we're going to have a great time with that. So, hey, if you found this content helpful, please like it. Please share it. Give us a review on podcast app. We would love to hear from you about how we could possibly even make it better. So thanks for joining us today, and we will see you again next week.
See you guys.